In the last episode of He was betrayed and left to die, but he came back for his revenge, we saw how Li Jian was able to defeat the Spider Queen, but also confront one of his suspected killers, Yang Wei, who was the leader of Ares' cadre. In the streets, the ongoing rescue operation involves numerous ambulances and rescue workers tending to the injured. Among the rescued individuals, Sunjae contemplates whether the person he's observing is indeed Li Jian. Despite Jian's altered appearance, Sunjae notices a familiarity in his movements that makes him wonder if it could truly be Jian. At that moment, someone calls out to Sunjae, and he turns to see Hugo approaching. Hugo asks what Sunjae is doing there. In a cold tone, Sunjae inquires when Hugo came back to Korea, prompting Hugo to respond humorously by asking if this is the tone he should use while talking to his father. This remark causes Jimin to laugh, while Sunjae maintains his cold expression and continues to look ahead. Noticing Sunjae's demeanor, Hugo changes the topic and mentions that Sunjae doesn't appear to be seriously injured and will likely recover after receiving medical treatment. Hugo proceeds to inquire whether Sunjae was at the mart, mentioning that he heard about a calamity being defeated and inquiring if Sunjae saw the person responsible for killing the monster. In response, Sunjae coldly affirms Hugo's question, prompting Hugo to smile and ponder who Sunjae is targeting. Suddenly, Jimin chimes in and asks Sunjae if Jian will be okay, leaving Hugo taken aback. He grabs Jimin by the shoulders, asking if he just mentioned Jian's name, and questioning how he knows Jian and where he is. This leaves Jimin perplexed, and he responds by asking if Hugo's name is Otiksu. Jimin goes on to reveal that Jian is inside the mart, has defeated the Spider Queen, and has introduced himself as Li Jian. Shocked by the revelation, Hugo implores Jimin to provide him with more detailed information. However, their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a massive explosion emanating from the mart building behind them, causing Hugo to turn around in confusion. Meanwhile, inside the shattered structure of the mart, Yang Wei makes a valiant effort to combat Jian. Jian comments on the intensity of the situation, remarking that it has been 20 years since they last met, and he questions why Yang Wei would suddenly attack him out of nowhere. Still grappling with disbelief, Yang Wei finds it difficult to accept that the person before him is truly Jian, who emerged alive from the tower. Upon closer inspection, he acknowledges that the individual bears a striking resemblance to Jian, yet he notices the absence of any scars on the person's face, and even their voice seems somewhat similar, but not entirely convincing. However, Yang Wei, convinced that this person is too young to be Jian, confronts him with a stern question, asking how he dares to impersonate Li Jian, and stating that he was alarmed for no reason. Hearing Yang Wei's accusatory words, Jian stands in confusion as Yang Wei continues, admonishing him for not knowing his place and daring to oppose him. Yang Wei rushes towards Jian, intending to launch an attack, but with a single punch, Jian sends him hurtling off the building. As Yang Wei remains suspended in the air, Jian swiftly maneuvers to the opposite side of him and delivers a powerful kick, sending him plummeting to the ground below. Upon landing in front of the fallen Yang Wei, Jian asserts that individuals like him truly need to be taught a lesson. He questions whether Yang Wei's life has improved after getting rid of him. Approaching Yang Wei, Jian reveals that he has learned about how they stole all his assets and forged his will, which only intensifies his anger and anxiety. With a cruel expression on his face, Jian declares his intention to eliminate all of them, starting with Yang Wei, and vows to destroy his house, his divine cadre, and all his divine artifacts. Yang Wei is left in shock, realizing that he cannot allow this to happen. He observes that the way this person speaks and acts does not seem like mere bluffing, and he was unable to anticipate the swift movements when Jian attacked him. Contemplating the situation, Yang Wei continues to doubt whether the person before him is truly Li Jian, returned from surviving the tower. However, deeming it impossible, he stands up once more and issues a challenge. Yang Wei states that if this individual is indeed Li Jian, then he should attempt to prove it to him. With that, Yang Wei ascends into the air, radiating an unusual energy and calling upon his special powers, which results in the appearance of the Ares owner, the Jade Emperor. Observing this, Jian smiles, regarding it as merely a partial manifestation of the divine being. At that moment, Yang Wei makes a single finger movement, causing magical chains to emerge from the ground and restrain Jian. Yang Wei questions whether Jian considered them too weak as he proceeds to summon numerous swords and weapons, arranging them in a circle around Jian. Activating his royal skill, known as the Divine Being's Weapon, Yang Wei directs all these weapons toward Jian. Remarkably, Jian displays no fear or anxiety on his face, and instead acknowledges the skill is impressive, causing Yang Wei to grow increasingly anxious. With all his might, Yang Wei propels the weapons toward Jian, who remains motionless and ensnared by the heavy chains. Suddenly, all the weapons converge on Jian's body, forming a massive pile of weapons where he stood. As some time passes, Yang Wei notices no movement beneath the pile of weapons and begins to wonder if Jian has been defeated or even killed. Approaching the heap of weapons, Yang Wei comments that while he was initially surprised by Jian's return from the tower, Jian has proven himself to be as foolish as ever. He taunts Jian for daring to challenge him and boasts about the increase in his power over the past 20 years. Suddenly, the pile of swords begins to emit a brilliant light. As Yang Wei watches in shock, the weapons start to shatter, and Jian emerges from within the pile. Jian delivers a powerful punch to Yang Wei's face, sending him crashing to the ground. Lying on the ground, Yang Wei wonders how Jian survived such a massive attack and questions whether he truly is Li Jian. With a cruel expression on his face, Jian affirms that Yang Wei has finally recognized him and declares that he is indeed back. Covering his nose, Jian remarks that even Yang Wei's weapons smell awful. Yang Wei stares at him in surprise, realizing that this level of restoration is impossible even for Aquarius healers. Suddenly, Jian begins to receive notifications that he has undergone a near-death experience, resulting in an increase in his power. He sarcastically thanks Yang Wei for this development. With his newfound strength, Jian confronts Yang Wei, suggesting that Yang Wei should experience a fraction of his power, which terrifies Yang Wei. This elicits a serious and perplexing reaction from the divine being of Aries, who inquires of Yang Wei how Jian managed to survive the demon tower. Following this, the divine being of Aries suddenly vanishes, leaving Yang Wei cursing and rendered powerless. Shocked by the divine being's abrupt disappearance, Yang Wei begins shouting, questioning why it has vanished. Meanwhile, Jian states that he knew it would be futile from the beginning. He asserts that he is showing mercy and will only make Yang Wei experience the pain he has endured, proceeding with his revenge. After some time has passed, the disciples of Aries and Hugo enter the building, examining the extensive destruction and wondering what transpired within. While they survey the scene, witnessing countless monster corpses scattered amidst the massive destruction, Hugo stands still, feeling bewildered. Suddenly, he begins to sense a potent energy and activates his skill to observe Yang Wei, who lies beneath the rubble beneath the building. Witnessing this, he realizes that it was undoubtedly Jian's doing. Soon after, the disciples also detect the same energy, recognizing that something is amiss. However, they find the energy to be too feeble to conclude that Yang Wei is alive, and they ponder what transpired inside the building. At this moment, Hugo takes a step forward and instructs everyone to step back for a moment. He then punches the ground with such force that a bright light abruptly emanates from within, leaving them all perplexed. The force of Hugo's punch shatters the floor of the building, creating a massive hole through which Hugo descends beneath the building and lands there. Upon his arrival, he discovers Yang Wei lying on the ground with a note from Jian placed on him. The note reveals that Jian has gone to Yang Wei's location, leaving Hugo to ponder Jian's intentions. Meanwhile, Jian arrives at a colossal museum that belongs to the Aries family, where he believes the divine artifacts stolen by Yang Wei are likely to be housed. Upon entering the museum, he notices a large crowd of people gathered inside, busily taking photographs of various exhibits. Jian's attention is drawn to a massive gold statue of Yang Wei prominently displayed in the museum, leading him to conclude that Yang Wei's obsession with displaying his wealth is quite evident. At that moment, Jian begins to detect the familiar scent of his stolen artifacts emanating from a particular corridor. He swiftly heads in that direction, discovering a multitude of items along the way, although most of them turn out to be counterfeit. However, his search yields a joyful discovery when he comes across his toothpick, carefully encased within one of the glass display boxes. This find fills Jian with immense satisfaction, as he has finally located his most precious possession. Suddenly, the entire museum's attention shifts as a burglar alarm begins to ring abruptly, creating a sense of urgency and alertness among the visitors who suspect a theft in progress. In the midst of this chaos, Jian stands with the toothpick in his hand, having shattered the glass display case. A significant number of security guards swiftly converged around him, demanding his surrender. In response, Jian smiles and declines, casually swinging the toothpick. To the astonishment of the guards and onlookers, a tempestuous gust of wind emanates from the toothpick, sending all the guards tumbling to the ground. Holding the toothpick, Jian remarks on the satisfaction of wielding something he is intimately familiar with. He proceeds to summon his most treasured divine artifact, Lime, a charming and endearing creature. The revelation of this divine artifact unlocks a host of new abilities while enhancing his existing ones. With Lime perched on his shoulder, Jian suggests that they begin their departure. However, as he nears the exit, he detects a potent energy emanating from a door, signaling the presence of Ares' divine artifacts. Fearing leaving empty-handed, he decides to open the door and venture inside to retrieve the items belonging to Yang Wei. Hugo arrives at the museum in the meantime and is startled to see people fleeing the now inferno-covered structure. This harrowing scene overwhelms him with a mixture of emotions, including frustration. Hugo, who is standing in front of Jian, addresses him as he exits the museum. While carrying a sizable sack filled with divine artifacts and experiencing hunger pangs, this unexpected encounter startles Jian. Hugo, with tears in his eyes, begins to run towards Jian, initiating a heartfelt and emotional moment between the two. As Hugo reaches out towards him, Jian abruptly states that they can no longer be friends. To Jian's surprise, Hugo disregards his statement and extends his hand towards the person approaching behind Jian, mistakenly assuming that person to be Jian. Jian watches in astonishment as Hugo begins conversing with this stranger, expressing concern about their well-being and whether he should have informed them of his survival. Growing increasingly irritated by the neglect, Jian turns towards Hugo and delivers a swift kick to his face, demanding to know if Hugo doesn't even remember his own face. As Hugo lies on the ground, Jian asserts that perhaps a physical lesson is necessary to clarify certain matters that should never be confused. Momentarily bewildered, Hugo gazes at Lime perched on Jian's shoulder, wondering if this person is indeed Jian. In response, Jian provocatively asks if a good beating is required to jolt him back to his senses, addressing him as Otaksu. This revelation triggers Hugo's realization that the individual before him is indeed Jian, prompting him to rise and embrace Jian tightly, leaving both of them in a state of confusion and emotional intensity. In response, Jian delivers a punch to Hugo's abdomen, questioning why he's hugging him out of nowhere. Hugo laughs and affirms that he truly is Jian. However, their moment is abruptly interrupted when a notification informs them of the sudden appearance of the divine god of Sagittarius, Apollo, leaving them both bewildered. As a radiant light materializes behind them, Apollo himself emerges, further confounding Hugo and Jian. After a brief pause, Apollo opens his eyes, and the duo stares at him with perplexity, wondering about the reason for his unexpected appearance. Suddenly, Apollo's gaze fixes on Jian, leaving him feeling bewildered once more as he receives a notification indicating that Apollo is questioning his survival and requesting verification of his identity as Li Jian. In response to Hugo's inquiry, Apollo cryptically mentions that something will occur if he shoots Jian with a flaming arrow and proceeds to aim at him, leaving both Jian and Hugo in a state of utter shock and confusion. Turning to Hugo, Jian inquires why Apollo has taken aim at him immediately upon appearing. Hugo, however, offers reassurance, saying that it's fine as long as Jian is safe. But then, Jian's demeanor suddenly changes, and he tells Hugo that he needs to repay him, leaving Hugo bewildered. With a cruel smile, Jian chillingly states that he intends to kill Hugo, a statement that shocks Hugo to his core. Jian proceeds to explain that upon exiting the tower, he discovered that his house had been sold, his will forged, and all of his divine artifacts stolen. Consequently, he expresses his desire to land at least one blow on Hugo. He raises his fist and strikes Hugo so forcefully that Hugo crashes to the ground. Despite the intensity of the situation, Hugo, with tears in his eyes, joyfully affirms that it is indeed Jian, expressing his relief at finally finding him. Just then, a substantial contingent of guards emerges from the museum, recognizing Jian as the individual responsible for stealing the divine artifacts. This realization dawns on Jian, making him aware that he has been pursued by the authorities. Hugo, curious about the situation, inquires about what exactly Jian has stolen. Jian points to the substantial sack of stolen items and informs Hugo that these are just a few of the things he managed to steal. Hugo gazes at the sack and realizes that Jian has essentially plundered Yang Wei's entire vault. Jian cheekily asks if he didn't do well, prompting Hugo to burst into laughter and call him crazy. Meanwhile, the guards express the urgency of capturing Jian, but their leader acknowledges that they are outmatched. He reveals that they have summoned someone who can match Jian's monstrous abilities and warns that Jian won't stand a chance. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind sweeps through the area, leaving Hugo in shock. In the next instant, a colossal creature with massive wings soars into the sky from above the museum's roof, and the leader of the guards declares that it has finally arrived. Descending to the ground with a thunderous impact, the monstrous entity reveals itself as Pishu, the household divine of Ares, known as the Beast of Riches. After landing in front of them, the gigantic creature unleashed a mighty roar. Observing this formidable adversary, Hugo advises Jian to simply discard the stolen items and flee, while Jian insists that Hugo should remain still. Asserting that he's a person with a plan, Jian turns to Lime and requests its sword. In response, Lime's body begins to emit a radiant light, and its eyes display the symbol of a sword. After a brief moment, it conjures a sword from its mouth, which Jian grabs with confidence, positioning himself in front of the monstrous Pishu. Jian now wields a small dagger-like sword, but he realizes that using such a weapon against the household divine will be challenging. With determination, Jian instructs the sword to reveal its true form. Suddenly, a peculiar energy envelops him, leaving Hugo perplexed. This energy undergoes a transformation, causing the initially small, unremarkable sword to grow into a massive, formidable, and potent weapon, one that Jian deems somewhat usable. Subsequently, he receives a notification indicating that the divine artifact has awakened due to the power of Aphiaches. As a result, the sword has acquired a critical head attribute, been honed to perfection, and its attack power has significantly increased. Having acquired the new skill called the 13th Sense, Jian smiles as he gazes at the monstrous Pishu, able to discern all of its vulnerable points with clarity. Armed with this knowledge, he raises his formidable sword and leaps into action, determined to inflict damage. Observing this from a distance, Hugo reflects on Jian's characteristic impulsiveness and his uncanny ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges. With a smile, Hugo encourages Jian to defeat the formidable foe. However, in a shocking turn of events, the monster raises its foot high into the air and appears to crush Jian beneath its massive weight, leaving Hugo stunned. With a menacing glint in its eyes, the monster stands triumphantly, but suddenly, its foot begins to tremble. Jian emerges from beneath the foot, effortlessly holding it aloft with a single hand, declaring that it's now his turn. The monster stares in disbelief as Jian, with a single swift strike of his sword, severs the creature's foot, causing it excruciating agony. Just then, Jian receives a notification indicating that the beast has initiated its abilities, leaving him puzzled. Suddenly, the monstrous creature lets out a deafening roar and starts to greedily absorb all the riches from its surroundings. Observing the massive destruction caused by his single strike, Jian smiles and comments that the beast wouldn't have been harmed if it had simply remained still. Holding his sword aloft, he leaps into the air once more and activates the trait of snake catch. With incredible force, he thrusts the sword into the ground, shattering the earth and striking the beast, causing it to topple over. The ensuing devastation spreads far and wide, leaving everyone in shock, while Jian stands confidently, wearing a self-assured smile. Gazing upon the extensive destruction resulting from a single sword strike, Hugo realizes that Jian's power remains as formidable as it was in his prime. Meanwhile, Jian stands proudly before the formidable beast, now lying on the ground. He receives a notification that his zodiac experience points have increased after defeating the creature. He is confused when he receives another notification asking him to decide whether to accept the beast into his home. Jian approaches the beast and touches it, causing a radiant light to surround the creature. Jian is aware of his special ability to control household divines, a privilege held only by the 12 saints. This leads the beast to rise once more, followed by a notification indicating that it has now become Jian's underling, part of his household. The beast then adjusts its size to be held by Jian, its new master. Jian contemplates that, as the Beast of Riches, it can be used to store all his treasures. Observing Jian holding the beast, Hugo is astonished by the transformation of the household divine into Jian's underling, and wonders what occurred during his absence for Jian to acquire such an ability. Suddenly, Jian receives a notification that he can give a name to the beast. After some thought, he suggests the name Piggy Bank, shocking Hugo with his choice of words. Later that night in Hugo's house, he vents his frustration on Jian, labeling him a traitor and expressing his worry about his well-being. Meanwhile, Jian, busy repairing his divine artifacts, mentions that he got married and was enjoying life with his family, while his friend was trapped in the tower. Jian proceeds to express his grievances and frustrations stemming from Hugo's actions, further emphasizing his disappointment. Rising from his seat, Jian mentions that he won't be able to stay at his own house. Hugo, however, offers the suggestion that Jian can stay with him since he lives alone. Misinterpreting Hugo's statement, Jian assumes that Hugo might be divorced and attempts to offer some encouragement, telling him to cheer up. In response, Hugo clarifies that this was not the intended meaning of his remark, likely referring to a different reason for Jian to stay with him.
That is all for this episode, folks. I hope that you enjoyed this manhwa till now, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for daily manhwa content for free. The next episode of this series will be released if this video hits 1,000 views, or have at least 5 comments asking for the next part. Thank you for watching Manhwa Quest.